The counterplan sells 100% the China will say yes to human rights and democratic reform, conditioning engagement against the U.S. negotiating leverage can be used to pressure China in meaningful reform, political reform on nature. That's HRW 16 performance is specific to how our tail process is able to substantially improve human rights in China. That solves the absence of counterplan effective results in the plan. Drop framing issue. If we win the counterplan solves all the cases and any risk of a net benefit is enough to vote net. Counterplan sells better than the F. They say China soft power kills U.S. power projection, but the U.S. tells China what to do. China will get the political credibility it needs, but the U.S. is still overseeing everything and appearing to bullying China. This perception solves any transition issues. And they say pressure historically fails, but they literally haven't been able to provide any examples of this. We have the Chen case. U.S. pressure forced Chinese to allow Chen to leave the country, and the counterplan's integrated approach is key advancing human rights throughout their issues, ensure success without danger of cooperation. We give China something they want in return for what we want. The safest method is a carrot and stick. Human rights issues can be pursued vigorously and simultaneously with other issues in the American agenda with China. That's HRF 12. On to net benefit. Chinese human rights increases are necessary for Chinese soft power and human rights underpins the moral setting China has in relations with other states and low level of human rights destroys confidence in Chinese leverage with dealing with smaller, both developing and larger Western countries. Chinese soft power is good. The Western model of soft power influence it fails and the switch to Chinese soft power solves multiple existential threats such as environmental protection, clashes over ideology, and overall peace. Only Chinese model solves for these issues. The Western models have failed, and China being modeled in these issues solves. Also, even if we don't win a large net benefit, any improvement of the human rights is still net benefit. On to the yes no debate. China will say yes to the condition by making the standards that China has to meet based on international law, where there's less likely to be backlash of the U.S. forcing China to meet demands. Also, even if China doesn't like human rights changes, they will say yes and won't let for the overall relationship as Chinese view benefits such as increased trade and better alliances as too important for human rights issues. Again, the way that's HRF, the evidence. On to the perm. They say perm to both the perm severance and engagement must be conditional and distinct from a conditional policies engagement on the building of close ties and conditional in contrast is conditionality in contrast is the linking of perceived benefits to others in another state in the basic condition. That's Smith. B. It should indicate immediacy and binding. The plan must happen first, which takes up the perm's legitimacy. C. Should indicate the plan must happen. The counterplan doesn't do the actual plan unless China says yes, which means uncertainty. And severance is a voter for fairness. Make the app a moving target makes it impossible for the next garner predictable offense for a voter for fairness. On to the Japan dissent. We can see that China and Japan alliance are flexible in this area. On to cooperation. Look at the real world. The UN tried to establish a similar treaty. CBMs were regarded as a total disaster. They don't explain why TCBMs would be any different. And extend Mujimara that the SCO solves or China blocks progress, not us. A. Obama's tried hard to spread a message of cooperation. We're concerned about China's violent rise. And B. China's side of co-op is rockets hard to read whether they want from space. And status quo solves framework for collaboration over debate that already exists between U.S. and China. The U.S. and China cooperate. NSA and Chinese military foreign affairs constantly checks with the DoD, so there's no risk of miscalc. That's Rose 15 evidence. And extend private sector solves a wave of private firms is seeking to build a commercial market for space situational awareness. Companies like Lockheed Martin, everyone's getting into the SSA game. No risk now. That's Loomis, and there's no risk of meltdown. Extend Maltabano. No risk of space weather impacts. We have an adequate prediction system in SCO, and NASA's only improving them. We have a clear picture of the sign type of weather. And extend Levent. No impact of grid shutdown. 20-hour warning exists now. Plenty of response time. And grid shut off. Give the capability to take things off the grid in SCO if there's any risk of space weather. And extend the Martyr 11 evidence. There's no impact to meltdowns. We have multiple warrants. One containment empirics prove that we're able to control meltdowns before they get out of hand. In fact, Japanese workers are doing that right now. And 2 water checks is able to act as a coolant and shield to aid in the control meltdowns. Japan is an island, so they definitely have enough water available, and there's no chance of international cooperation in space. So space is considered a strategic high ground. Countries fear that respective asymmetric advantages in space exploration might be eliminated, or cooperation in space is zero sum. That's CSIS. And also, Major All calls that when conceded in the 1AR, the U.S. won't shift to cooperation until it secures against perceived Russian aggression. The U.S. concerns over risk of the risks in the future are driven much by Russian activities as they are by China. Russia may be testing their own ASAT weapons. Solving for Russia, U.S.-China relationship is a prerequisite before the app happens. That's Whedon. Onto the miscalc. Extend Wordsworth. There's no risk of space where A. Mutual reliance to breach from space tax is uncontrollable and too high of a risk for each country's own tech. B. Too expensive building and cleanup fees are much too much for both sides. And C. Not feasible. Truly destructive offensive capabilities don't exist yet and won't. Also extend Wien. There's no space or arms race. Goes against the core co-op principles. China wants to work with the U.S. and won't risk it. B. Cost outweighs the benefits. They know U.S. space program is superior and they want to be a part of the new global space efforts. And space war is too risky for everyone that has any assets in space. And extend the Land 15 evidence, which says the U.S. and China hotline solves for any miscalc, and all of their impacts don't take into account the fact that China is becoming more invested in space. Solves any possibility of miscalc because no one wants this. China becomes more invested in space. Their capabilities take on the same vulnerabilities as the U.S. China will have as much to lose as it has to gain from space conflict. That was the Paul Peter evidence. Extend no miscalc or overreaction or accidental war. That was the Quinlan 9 evidence, and the momentum in developing exchange with each side rushing to overreaction is implausible because there have been accidents. There has certainly have been accidents involving nuclear weapons in the past, but none, however, until the nuclear detonation. The probability of any accident triggering nuclear explosion is extremely low, and the probability of initial misinterpretation leading towards mistaken launch is remote.